I'm Andrea with My Fabric Addiction. I am the quilter here, and I wanted to show you our newest table runner that we have coming out called Sparklers. It's really pretty red, white, and blue. Table runner for 4th of July. So something that's really cool about My Fabric Addiction that's different from other fabric stores is our kits are all pre-cut. So when you get your kit from us, this would be like what you would normally get from a quilt store, you know, 5/8 yard of one thing, 3/8 of the blue, whatever, and they would just give you this little package of fabric. But with us, this is what you get. Everything is pre-cut and ready for you to be able to sew your quilt, your table runner. When you get your package, this one comes with 100 white, 40 of our red, and 40 of our blue. So we open it up. We are going to skip most of this. Which one is it? There we go. So it tells you to cut all of this. We don't do any cutting here. Everything is all ready for you. So first thing you are going to do is you are gonna make our half square triangles. I like to do what's called chain piecing. Chain piece these together. Chain piecing means you are going to not cut your thread in between. So I like to start with my needle down. It's just easiest for me. You're gonna stick that underneath your needle and run it through. Doesn't matter if you just want to make sure it's right sides together. Your white doesn't matter because it's the same either side. But you want to make sure that your print is always the right sides together. And we are going to do this with all of our half square triangles. Your pattern will tell you. It'll tell you how many red and white, how many blue and white, and we have some red and blues. So this will just take me a little bit to get all this sewn together. Okay, so after you have all of your half square triangles all sewn together, I just leave them in one big old long strand. And we're gonna take it over and we are gonna iron them. So, well, I should say pressing. We wanna press, not iron. So, how I do it is I lay it out, and I always press my seam first, and then I like to actually finger press it first and then set it down. And I am actually going to open our seams. When you are doing blocks like half square triangles or things like that that have a lot of bulk in them, I always like to open the seams. They just seem to lay flatter and nicer. So you're gonna go through and you are going to open up all your half square triangles. You just want to make sure that everything is laid out like the pattern. I just go row by row. I always have to check like 50 times. And I don't mess it up. Even while I'm sewing it, I will double check and double check because I hate having to rip them out. And I do have to do it all the time. You can see your star starting to form. You know it's going right. This one turned out so pretty. A whole bunch of reds. That doesn't look right. Always double check before you start sewing. So when I do my rows, I will take them and I want to make sure that these line up together. Some patterns will have your instructions on which way to press, but we're pressing everything open, so that looks correct. Always just double check before I totally pull it through. Chain piece them again. So when I'm making my files, I always go down with the first two and just go lay them out, measure them up where they're supposed to go. Make sure. Now when I get to this one, I've done my first row, so now I will take it and I will open up and I will finger press this seam just so it makes it easier later. I'll just finger press it and then I will come up and I will grab my next one and I will put it up and I will sew this one. It's my easiest way that I have found to make sure my pattern is staying correct. Line up my seams. Okay, so once you have everything all ironed or pressed out, you lay your block back out, make sure it's all laying the way it's supposed to. Then I'm going to take each row and we are going to pin our seams together. When our seams are open, we can just look at them right here and just see that they are lined up. And then we're going to stick a pin. I'm a big pinner. When we are deciding which way to put it into the machine, I always kind of look, and you can see there's fullness right here to match up my seams. These are not perfect. So I want to put those against the feed dogs because your feed dogs will gather up the fabric and will ease all of that in. Okay, when we're coming up to these seams right here, we want to make sure that our needle is hitting right here. That is our star point. And we want to make sure that we have those star points. Don't sew over pins. All right, so once you've got them all sewn together, now we are going to press them open. And we are going to sew the next rows together. We'll pin them up. Okay, it is all sewn. Set our seam. Sometimes it helps to finger press as you go along. Nice and pretty. Okay, so now that we have our blocks made, nice and pretty, so we have to be careful about how we place them together. So the blocks are made all the same. They look all the same, and then it's the way you put them, piece them together, that you get the right look that you're looking for. So we want to put our triangles, these ones together. So if we did it like this, that's gonna not turn out like the pattern says. So we want to turn it like that. So we would lay it out, make sure it's all laying the way we want to. And then we will nest our seams. These are all pressed open so that it makes it easy to see. So I see that they are together, and I pin on this side, and then I pin on this side. And you can see that they match up. If you did your seams from one side to the other, they will not nest with this, the way this pattern is made. So I always do it open. I try to anyways when I am doing half square triangles, to do it open anyways, because then they get really bulky. Your seams get very bulky, and it makes it hard for your machine to sew over them. So just line it up. Sometimes when you are pinning, you want to make sure they match up, but sometimes you see this gaping right here. That's going to be fine. We're going to ease that in. So we're always going to put the side that has the most gaping on your feed dogs, because your feed dogs, which are the little teeth on the bottom of your machine that pulls your fabric through, it always pulls more on the feed dogs than on the top. So I usually always start out with my needle down. Let's line up those the best you can. Stick it under. Go. I always take my pins out as I go. I've sewn over pins before, and your machine does not like it. I'll get as close as I can before I take them out. So when I'm coming up to these triangles right here, I always try and be on this side, my needle on this side of that triangle, coming up on that one. That just shows that my triangles will have their points. If you don't get them, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. There's no fabric police, sewing police. Just takes practice. And then you'd open it up. have to be careful when I'm pressing these that I'm not pushing the other seams down. I like my back to look as pretty as the front. Nice and straight. The last one, make sure our points are going the way we want them. Not like this. We want triangles. Another way you could do it, if you wanted to be careful, you could stick your pin in that right there, and then stick it right here, also in that triangle. Lay that flat, and then pin on either side, if you wanted to be that picky. Pull that one out. Okay, so after you have gotten your table runner all sewn together, we are going to make the borders. So our borders, there's lots of different ways you can do it. My favorite is to use the folded corner clipper. You just stick it on there. This border is 2.5. I will cut that to get my seam. Bring it over, and we'll join. You could do a straight seam. I prefer to do a diagonal seam just because it's a lot less bulk, I think. Open them up. Set our seam. And they are joined together. Usually we'll iron make sure that it's nice and straight as I can get them. Those are our long pieces. On our ends, we have 2 of those. So you'll have 5 pieces. You'll have 2 that you'll sew together, 2 that you'll sew together, and then 1 that we'll put our ends on. We're going to start with that, and then 1 that we'll put our ends on. We're going to start with that. So I will usually put it, so you have your selvage. I put the selvage just a little bit past, and then I will pin that down just so it holds it for me. You could pin it all the way down. I do on long borders, just to hold things. You gotta make sure that you have your edges together right here. I always backstitch on my borders because that is what's going to hold all of your quilt together when you are trying to, when you send it off to Long Armor or you do your own quilting. You just want to line up your edges from your top to your border piece. I'll cut that off, and then I will just trim this at the end a little bit longer than your runner. And then I will turn it and I'll put the other side on. I'll do the same thing. This is not the selvage end this time. To make sure that my seams are laying the way they need to be. side borders. Set my seam, and we'll just roll it back. Trim up our edges. Grab my ruler the right way. So when I trim my edges, I try and line up my border piece with my side so that I know that is going to be a right corner, square corner. Do that on both sides. All right. Now we have our side borders. Okay, so after we do our end border, we're gonna put on our side borders. I myself like to do my sides and then my top and bottom. Just kind of like your finishing touch. So again, your selvage edge, I put it just a little bit past. You can cut it perfect the first time. Pick it up because I'm saying it. But I always like to trim it at the end so that I get the right size. If you trim it beforehand and sew it, it might not be totally square. So that's why I do it that way. Start with my needle down, just a preference. Actually, let's start it in just a little bit. So this is a tricky part. Sometimes when you're sewing, you might accidentally have it go like this, and then that is not going to have a big enough seam allowance. This side's gonna be too small. So I always try to really make sure that that is where it needs to be before I start sewing. I'll always pull it back just a little bit, just so I can see. I'll grab my thread, nail down. My pin. Once I get to the fabric, I can see that I'm past it. That's when I'll do a little tiny back stitch, just so those seams will not pop open after you have trimmed. Always watch my bottom. Make sure my seams are laying flat still. I always put my borders on top, and I do that so if I put them on the bottom, it might make them wavy. All right, so after you've gotten both borders sewn on, we are going to iron them out. So set your seam and roll them back. Haven't trimmed this off yet. I will do that at the end. Didn't have to. I did it on the ends. I needed to use the fabric on the other side, so I trimmed it off. All right, we're going to turn it up. Iron out of the way. Side, line up your lines, your border, and on your side. And your runner is finished. You just have to clean up trim up any of your threads you have, and then quilt it and bind it as you need. That is the Sparklers runner.